right, moving on to theme number 2. All right, so if you were with me yesterday, we talked about hugs and kisses blocks. Remember? Hugs and kisses blocks. Has anyone made their quilt yet? Just kidding. And we talked a little bit about pressing, and I said that today I was going to talk to you a little bit more about pressing and the pros and cons of whether do you press your seams to the side or do you press them open. That, my friends, is the $1,000,000 question in the quilting industry. And I promise you this, if you get 10 quilters in the same room and you ask them, seams pressed to the side, seams pressed open, you're going to get lots of different answers. So let me hear from you first. Press to the side? Are you in the camp of pressing to the side? And why? Or are you in the camp of pressing open? And why? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll read some of them here. Okay, so and we're going to talk about yes and no. Why would you? Why wouldn't you? Oh, okay. There we go. Diana says you're going to get 10 different answers or a fight. That's right. No, we're all going to be very, very nice. There are worse things, right? Than side seam, open seam, side seam. There you go. Okay, I like what Alicia said. She said, whatever works at the time. True story. There's actually more truth to it than you think. So, very good point, Alicia. Depends on the pattern, Connie says. Beth says to the side in order to nest. Ah, good point. Okay, when you have them to one side and to the other side, then you can nest them. Really good point. Okay, a lot of you say it depends. All right, let's see. Okay, that's fair. Donna says to the side. It's easier. True story. Okay, define easy, right? But you're right. It's a little faster to press our sides to our seams to the side, right? Pam says sides because of nesting. Joyce says open if it's a bulk seam. Definitely. Yep. All right. Let me give a couple more things out here and then I'll tell you my opinion. Okay. There we go. Interesting. A lot of you might be under this school of thought. I was taught to press open on clothing and closed on quilting. Yeah. Yeah, that is the way a lot of us have learned, right? And let's see, one more real quick one. I can't even read through all of them I always go back and read through, by the way. But let's see. Okay, I'm going to grab this one. Barbara says, depends on the quilt. I prefer to press to the side and nest the seams, but sometimes must press open. Yep. All right, so let's talk about it. Okay, so first of all, I want you to consider that there's really no right or wrong answer. So you may agree with me with what I'm going to share with you today. You may disagree with me. It's okay. All right. And I'm kind of under the thought process of it really depends on the project, right? Okay. If I've got lots of seams going in at one place, I am for sure pressing that seam open wherever I can. But there's a lot of benefits to both. So both methods have their benefits, and there really is no right or wrong way. Now, interestingly enough, when we consider the fact, and this is what I used to think, I was always under the impression that you had to press to the side because it made a stronger seam. Any of you heard that same rule of thumb? Okay, and that is not necessarily the case, and I'm going to talk to you about through that today, and maybe I'll change your mind here. That's not always the case. Where that kind of narrative comes from as I was doing some more research on this, where that narrative comes from is when our, you know, people who sewed a long time before us and they did not use sewing machines and they would hand stitch. Can you imagine? I know some people still do. Well, if you're an English paper piecer, you still do. But some people still will do a whole quilt hand stitched. Most of us are not, though, right? So that old adage came from when we were hand stitching, and you would definitely press your seams to the side because you didn't want to take the chance of seams popping open, of seams coming undone, unraveling, all of that. And so pressing to the side actually gave a better strength in that seam. Okay, so but interestingly enough, some really good quilters out there actually press all their seams open. In fact, Nancy Zeman, you all know and love Nancy Zeman, she had made a comment once that I just have never forgotten, that she had said that opening seams on your quilt will actually give you a quilt prize worthy advantage. Ooh. That's a big deal, right? A quilt prize worthy advantage by opening your seams. What did she mean by that exactly? Well, one of the things that why pressing seams open is actually a wonderful thing is because your quilt blocks are going to be so flat, really nice and flat, and they're going to you're actually going to get flatter blocks, more perfect points, and just the sizing works better. Interesting, right? Now, does Kris always press her seams open? Nope. I oftentimes will press to the different sides because I do like to nest. But nesting is not always foolproof either. You know, if you've got a little bit more fabric on one side than on the other side, it's going to kind of snake itself way over. So that's not always the case. Now, the key though, I believe, if you are thinking, you know what, I want to give pressing seams open a try, I'm going to give it a fair shot, right? Then really what the key is to shorten your stitch length. Okay, did everyone hear that? Shorten your stitch length. All right. So, yeah, I know Joanne says she loved Nancy too, but doesn't agree with what she said. That's okay. You don't have to. It's just an interesting thing to think about, right? I got this hair going all over. It's just an interesting thing to think about. Nobody has all the answers. So what you have to decide for yourself is, you know what? I'm going to stitch up a little four patch, and I'm going to do it in two different ways. I'm going to do one where I press the seams to the side. I'm going to do one where I press the seams open, and I'm going to see which way I like better. Okay, because each of us are individuals, so it's not a one way is everything. I'm just sharing with you thoughts to think about, right? Okay, so shortening your stitch length is really going to make this method foolproof. All right, and when I say shorten stitch length, I'm talking like if our default is at a 2.5, 2.5 is usually what it's at, right? By default, I would actually do it to like a 1.6. All right, 1.6. That is pretty strong. If you pull on those seams, they're not going anywhere. Guess what else is really beneficial to that? Because now you have a real way to stitch in the ditch. Oh, some might be thinking, wait a minute, no, you can't stitch in the ditch on that. You're going to pop a seam or something. No, you won't. If you shorten your stitch length, okay? If you shorten your stitch length, you will be, yeah, you're good. If you shorten your stitch length, you won't have a problem, okay? You will be able to stitch in the ditch, and you really have a real ditch to stitch into, right? It is a problem if you don't shorten your stitch length. If you do, you shouldn't have a problem. Now, some may also wonder, like, oh, has this ever happened to you? We're at the end. Yeah, if you shorten your stitch length, you should be fine. Okay, this was done with a regular stitch length. If you shorten your stitch length, you should be fine. You can always do like a stay stitch around a block if you wanted to make sure that those seams don't pop open. Let me tell you who will also love you for really flat seams. Can anyone guess? Who in your life is going to sing your praises if you have really nice flat seams? Any ideas? Your long armor. Your long armor is going to love you because when you think about it, if you've got lots of seams all going in at one place, then you could have 5, 6, 7, 8 layers of fabric in one small area. Guess what happens when the long armor goes to it? There you go. Broken needles, right? Broken thread. Frustration! So long armors love it when your seams are nice and flat. So lots of things to think about, right? Let me think, what else do I want to say about that? Okay, if you're worried about bearding, you know, sometimes people would say, well, I don't know if you should press your seams open, because what about the bearding that comes through with the batting that's going to just kind of migrate up to the top of the finished quilt, right, through the seams? Well, if you're using good quality bonded batting, you're going to be just fine. All right, if that bonded batting has maybe just this really light adhesive on both sides, that's going to prevent bearding. But also it's not going to come through if you have a shorter stitch length. So that's why I keep saying shorten your stitch length. Now, yes, I know if you have problems where you have to unpick that seam, well, Jan says great sound effects. Yeah, you're gonna be just fine. Again, shorten that stitch length. If you're gonna have to unpick, yeah, it kind of stinks, right? Kind of stinks, but you can do it. You can do it. All right, so if you're struggling, I guess what I want to say is if you're struggling with trying to make points match or whatever, consider just pressing the seam open. You're going to have a much clearer vision of where those seams come together. There's a tool called fork pins that is very helpful because it's like a pin with two points to it. You can put it on both sides of that seam. But boy, those seams are going to be nice and flat. Okay, so here's this. I've got another block that we've been working on. Isn't that cute? And seams are all open. All the seams are pressed open. And this lays really nice and flat. Okay, so again, shorten your stitch length. You will not have a weak seam. You will not have any bearding with the batting coming up through it. And you're going to have a very nice flat block. Now, have you heard of clappers? Those are pretty awesome too. So if you've got a clapper, you know, tailors use clappers, right? Guess what? Quilters, we get to use clappers too if we want to. I don't have one here handy. But if you really wanted a flat seam, what you could do is press it. I'm going to show you one way that I do it. And then put that wooden clapper on top. Steam comes into that and you have a really flat seam. Sherry says, do you like steam to open or just dry? Oh, well, I love steam. I'm a steamer. I'm a steam girl. Some people would not agree with me. I personally love steam. I just am very careful about that steam. I'm not ironing a Sunday shirt, folks. When I'm pressing and I put it down and then I lift it up and then I bring it down. And that is when I can feel okay about using the steam. All right. Let's see. What other questions do we have? Um, Ooh, I found this really good quote. I wonder, I don't know if I can put it on here. There was a quilter by the name of Mabry Benson. She explained about pressing seams open versus the side, and she talked also about the hand sewing. Hand piecing is when we really got into that school of thought. Um, and she said the seam is not made any stronger by pressing it to one side, just the weakness is covered up. Interesting. Interesting. So, anyway, just something to consider, something to think about. All right. Yeah, the way Jennifer says to press seams works very well. Like I said, it's not for everyone. You do you, right? You do what you feel most comfortable, whether it's to the side or open. That's why it's the great debate. It's the same great debate as to, do you wash or pre-wash, right? Do you steam or no steam? There's no right answer. It's just the fact that we all do things a little differently. So it's worth considering being open to the fact that it's not a bad idea to shorten your stitch length. And then you can press your seams open and have a really nice flat box. Okay? So, what is a good length for a shorter stitch? Charlotte is asking. I would say a 1.6. That would be my go-to. All right. Yes, Barbara, absolutely. She says use acorn pressing treatment to have a wonderful flat seam. Absolutely. There are a lot of different products out there. There are a lot of different ways to get the same results. I'm just sharing with these are some of the results you'll find when you do open versus to the side. Okay? But absolutely, I love acorn pressing treatments. They're awesome. So lots of different things to consider. Okay, so I will tell you one of the problems that I have when it comes to opening seams. It's kind of a bugger to do. Let's be honest. When pressing seams to the side, it does go quicker. It's faster. You can kind of nudge that over where you want. But there is a product out there that has made it so much easier for me when it comes to pressing seams open. You ready for it? Any of you heard of this? This is called the strip stick. Woohoo! Okay, this is the strip stick. Linda asks, what is the acorn procedure? It is a solution. We have talked about it on a 3 at 3. In fact, Jessica did a 3 at 3 with it once. Our friend Jennifer Broycroft has taught Tucker classes using acorn. So if you go to our YouTube channel and type in acorn on the search, you can find out more there, because I love that product as well. Okay, some of you have this. Melinda says, I love my strip stick. Okay. Lena says she used it on her Bergello quilt. Awesome. Okay. Give a good old whip to somebody. To that spouse who asks you to bring the chips back from the kitchen on your way back to the TV. Right? Am I right? If you missed theme number 1, you'll have to go back and know what I'm referring to. Here we go. Deborah says, I have a set of 3 sticks in different lengths and could never figure out how to use them. Awesome. Well, I'm going to show you today for our demo of how these are used. Okay. So basically it is a piece of wood, has a rounded edge and a flat bottom. All right. That's all it is. But then it has a muslin covering and it feels like an ironing board, a really strong ironing board, I will say. Okay, no give to it. It is a solid piece of wood. Let me tell you why. One of the reasons why I love this is because it is portable. I can throw this in my bag and take it anywhere I want it to go. Okay, I don't have to have an ironing board right next to me in order to open up my seams. Can you use this with pressing seams to the side? Yep, you can use them with pressing seams to the side as well. Okay, so no worries there. But for opening up seams, this is pretty sweet. So let's do this little demo here, and I'm going to bring you down. Oops. right down to my little ironing station here. How do you like that mess? Ah, that happens, doesn't it? Okay, here's my strip stick. Now, this is just 2 blocks that have been sewn together. And what I'm going to do is first set the seam. Do we all do that before we open up a block? I love setting the seam first. And while it is still hot, I will actually turn it over, open it up with my fingers, and give it a little finger press, just like that. Now, what I want you to notice and why this is so cool is because the gravity brings this down. So if I have lots of pieces that are coming together, I'm not going to get my iron on the other pieces. Have you ever had that happen to you? It is so frustrating. You're trying to press a seam and then all of a sudden, darn it, I caught another seam. It keeps the seam on top. All right. And so then when it's on top, I'm going to just give it press like this. And voila, there we go. A very nice open seam. That is really nice and flat. And then what I'll do is I'll flip it over and I will give it one more press. All right. And now I have a really great seam. Nice and flat. It's open, and it was so easy to do. So this strip stick, they have different sizes. The one that we carry is the one I think I would use the most often, and that is the 18-inch stick. Okay, so you're gonna be able to do blocks of all sizes. But how many of you have done, and I'm gonna show you another little demo here in a second, but how many of you have done like strip quilts, right? And so they actually have like a 45-inch one. That's just, I'm sorry, that is just way too long for me. I will actually use this and just slide it down. Personal thing. But this is what's so cool. And yes, Larry says that tool is like a tailor hem for pressing garment sleeves and curves. Exactly. This is a tool that's been around for ages for those who are garment sewers. You know, they're used to having the seam up on top and being able to press those seams open. Now they make these so convenient and doable for people who are wanting to do their quilt blocks this way. It's pretty cool, right? So again, I think the key is here to make this, for those of you who might have had this and haven't been sure how to use it or haven't had the best of luck, this, I believe, my friends, is the key. Okay, first of all, what are we going to do with our stitch length? We're going to shorten it. We're going to shorten it to about a 1.5, 1.6. All right, we're going to sew it, and then we're going to do what's called setting the seam. While it is still warm, I'll bring it up, lay it on top, open it up with my fingers, and give it a little finger press. And now I can take that again and press. Okay, there we go. And then flip it over and press again. Okay, very nice flat seam. How many of you join your binding with doing it on the bias, right? And you're doing it, you're stitching it like this. Why do we do that? Why couldn't we just stitch? Let's see. Why couldn't we just stitch right angle to right angle? It's like a straight. Okay? I don't have this straight. I have this at an angle. But why couldn't we just sew our strips just short end to short end? Well, you could. Always you could, right? But the reason why it's better to actually do it on a diagonal is because it spreads out your seam. And so it reduces the bulk. Now, what I will also do when I'm doing this is I will press those seams open. So again, I just grab put my little fingertips in there, give it a little finger press, and then press on top. And because this is hard and there's no give to this stick, it is a hard piece of wood, that's why these seams actually end up laying so nice and flat. And then I'll just give one more press right here. All right, and then it's ready to go. This block I was showing you yesterday when we talked about, well, we were talking about X's and O's, and this was just another version of X's and O's. But you can see right here that by having all these seams be flat, you have no extra bulk here. If this were over to this way, and this seam was over this way, and then you had this one coming over this way, you got like 6 layers of fabric right there, right? But by pressing them open, we're able to really make that that seam allowance go out and spread out, and it's just so much, the results are just so much nicer. All right, and again, taking a look at this one, you can see that this is really nice and flat. The quilter is going to be so happy. Now here's another strip. This would be a long one, and again, I'll set my seam, giving it some heat, and I could put this whole thing on, open it up, finger press it like this, go all the way down, take my iron and go all the way down. But where this really comes in handy, okay, these were some simple examples to show you, right? But you know that when you have lots of blocks that are lined up right against each other, boom, 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 then you are always, it feels like I'm always getting that next block in my ironing, in my pressing, and I go, oh, darn it. Why is that going that way? Well, that's why I love this, because it brings it up and out of the way of any other seam. And I just do one seam at a time, and I just, you know, go joop, joop, joop. So if I had, let's say 10 little 1-inch blocks that was all going down, I would just press, and then I move it up the hill, if you will. And then I press, and then move it up the hill and down the hill and up the hill and down the hill, and it is awesome. Okay, so let's see. Couldn't you? Yeah, you could use that. Alicia said, couldn't you use round baseboard molding? Sure. This is just convenient because it's already, you know, it's ready for you. It has a batting inside of it. It's got the muslin. It's serged on the edges. It's just so simple. But surely, if you have this is basically like a baseboard molding. Absolutely. As long as it's keeping it up and above, there you go. Okay. Ah, Debbie says, I've had mine for years, but didn't know how to use it. Yay! I'm so glad. I'm so glad I was able to help with that. And like I said, you don't have to use it just for pressing your seams open. You can certainly use it for pressing seams to the side, and it just kind of pushes it over. Okay. So Diana says she uses this for trouser seams. There you go. I like that. Can it help flatten a seam in a pillowcase? Absolutely. Okay, so again, I want you to remember that in the great debate of whether to press your seams to the side or have them open, so much is left to you. So give it a try. Like I said, do a couple four patch blocks and see if this is something that makes a difference for you. And you go, you know what? I really like the way that block turned out. That's awesome. And if you're still loving the way it is to the side, that's okay too. It is not a one all end all for me. Most of my blocks, I am sewing it to the side or pressing it to the side, just because it's easier. It's a little bit faster than doing it this way. And someone said nesting seams. Yeah, I love nesting my seams. But there are many blocks, many times when it's really necessary to keep those seams open. And if this can make the job a little bit easier, then give it a try. Or for people who go, you know what, I'm just really struggling with having my seams match up, especially if you've got, you know, just see a lot of small pieces and stuff, especially if you're doing mini quilts or mini blocks. How many of you were doing the our mini snowman quilt, little miniature quilt? If you're doing those snowflake blocks, you're going to want to press those seams open because they're really small, right? So anyway, just something to think about, something to consider. And let's see. Okay, so great question. Deborah asks, where did I just saw it. And then, okay, no, Linda asked. Okay, let me pull this over because I can answer that. Sometimes long arm quilters don't recommend open seams as it can cut the thread when they are quilting. What are your thoughts? Well, I'll tell you, one of my favorite long arm quilters out there is Leah Day. Any of you familiar with Leah Day's work? She's amazing. And guess what? She presses all of her seams open, regardless. That is just her go-to. She presses everything open. And she is, you know, we're on the same page when I say if you will shorten your stitch length, you'll just have much better results. Now, if you're going to use a regular stitch length, yeah, maybe you're going to have some more trouble. You're going to run into some issues with opening those seams in and stitching them in the ditch, or having seams pop open and things like, and batting coming through. Yeah, that might happen. But if you will shorten your stitch length, you shouldn't have that problem. So, you know, things to consider. All right. Yay. Okay, Deborah says, so you can use it for pressing to the side. I just never got the hang of that, but see the real benefits of using it for pressing seams open. Yes. You know, Deborah, I still, the times I use this the most is when I'm pressing seams open. Can it be used for pressing seams to the side? Yes. But certainly the time that I use it the most is when I'm pressing seams open. All right. Okay, there we go. Larry, good point. He said, I find I do a combination of both open and one side. If I'm doing 8-pointed star, the shorter stick and open seam works well for me. Absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, right? So, you know, some of the seams might come together and you're going to say, yep, pushing them to the side, that works great, right? And then there's going to be times when those seams start needing to come together. And guess what? You're going to want to press them open. I promise you that. Okay, so, ooh, hey, Miss Jenny. Jenny's on here right now. And she said, I like to press open, especially on flip and fold and flying geese. Jenny's the one who actually has been working on this block. And she's like, oh, Kris, I do all my seams open. I was like, really? She's like, yeah, I do. And so it's so true. So it just... yeah, flying geese blocks, oh, they're going to look a lot better if they're pressed open. Just a thought. Now, there's ways to do it without. But if you are struggling with points not matching up or cutting off points, give it a try. All right? All right. Larry adds this comment, and besides, I've never seen a quilt judge open a quilt to see which way I press. No. And that's okay. It's just, consider what Nancy Zeman said when she said that, you know, so many of the quilts that she has seen, if the quilt prize worthy, whatever, you know, take it for what it is. But she said that most oftentimes the seams are open. Does it matter in the scheme of life? No. You do whatever you like the best and whatever makes sense to you. Just putting it out there. Okay. All right. Molly says, what about light and dark fabric? Well, yeah, you know, oftentimes we're told to press towards the dark, right? Press to the dark side is what we often hear. Yeah, That, I mean, that is kind of the school of thought. That's what I've always said as well. But, there's also times when you just want to keep that seam nice and open and distribute the bulk evenly on both sides. So try it out. A different quilt will call for different things. All right.